They tell you to protect your seed phrase like your life depends on it. What they don't tell you is that sometimes your life depends on protecting it from the woman you married. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers, and he wanted his experience heard. I'm sitting in a studio apartment in Austin, staring at an empty wallet app on my phone. 6 months ago, I had 2.3 Bitcoin sitting pretty in cold storage. Today, I've got $17 in my checking account and a divorce lawyer who won't return my calls. My name's Earl. I'm 65 years old, and I just learned the hard way that love and cryptocurrency don't mix well in the Philippines. The whole mess started when I thought I was being smart about my retirement. After 38 years working, oil rigs in West Texas, my body was shot and my savings were modest. My ex-wife had taken half of everything in our divorce 10 years back, and Social Security wasn't going to cut it for the retirement I'd dreamed about. That's when I discovered Bitcoin. I put every spare dollar into crypto during the 2020 dip, watching it grow into something that could actually give me options. By 2024, those 2.3 coins were worth enough to live comfortably somewhere cheaper than Texas, somewhere like the Philippines. I'd been chatting with Celeste on a dating app for 8 months before she suggested I visit. She was 28, beautiful, and lived in Cebu City. "You should come see my country," she'd say during our video calls. "I want to show you the real Philippines, not just what tourists see." Her English was perfect, her smile was genuine, and when she laughed at my terrible jokes, I felt something I hadn't felt since my 30s. Maybe it was love, maybe it was loneliness, but it felt real enough to book a plane ticket. When I stepped off that plane at Mactan Airport, Celeste was waiting with a smile that made my chest tight. She looked even better in person. Long black hair, warm brown eyes, and this laugh that made me forget I was old enough to be her father. We spent 2 weeks island hopping, eating fresh mango and talking about everything. "My father died when I was 15, she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from a beach in Bohol. "Cancer. He couldn't afford the good treatment." I watched her face as she spoke, seeing pain there that felt genuine. "I've been taking care of my mother and sisters ever since, working in call centers, saving every peso." She turned to me with those dark eyes. "That's why I want something different, something real." I told her about my years on the rigs, about my divorce, about feeling invisible in America. "You're not invisible to me," she said, taking my hand. "I see a man who worked hard his whole life, a man who deserves to be happy." By week 2, she was calling me my love, and I was calling her the same. We talked about her dreams of opening a restaurant, about my plans to retire somewhere warm. "The Philippines is perfect for expats," she said. "Your money goes so much further here. We could build a beautiful life together." The night before I flew back to Austin, she cried in my arms. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. "Will you think about staying? About us having a future together?" I promised her I would. Flying back to Texas, I couldn't stop thinking about those 2 weeks. For the first time in years, I'd felt needed, wanted, alive. Back in Texas, everything felt gray. My trailer park, my routine, my empty evenings watching Netflix alone. Celeste and I video called every day, sometimes for hours. She'd show me her city through her phone camera, walking through the markets, introducing me to her family over video. Her mother, Luz, would wave and say, "Hello, Earl," in broken English. Her sisters, Anna and Joy, were shy but sweet, giggling when they tried to practice English with me. "See how much they already love you," Celeste would say. "You're already part of our family." She'd tell me about her days working at a call center, about her dreams of opening a restaurant someday. "I know exactly where I'd want it," she'd say, showing me pictures of busy streets in Cebu, near the IT district where all the expats work. American breakfast for the foreigners, Filipino comfort food for locals. We could make it work, Earl, together. I started researching expat life in the Philippines obsessively, reading forums, watching YouTube videos, calculating costs. The math was incredible. My Social Security would go 3 times further there. My Bitcoin stash could buy us a house, fund that restaurant, give us the kind of life I'd never imagined possible. 3 months after my visit, during one of our nightly calls, I made the decision that would change everything. "Celeste," I said, my heart pounding, "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" She started crying, immediately happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Earl, yes, oh my God, yes!" I could hear her mother and sisters cheering in the background. Luz came on camera and said something in Visayan that Celeste translated. She says, "You're a blessing from God." She says, "Welcome to the family, son." I felt tears in my own eyes. I was going to be a husband again. I was going to have a family. Again. I was going to matter to someone. I started the visa paperwork the next day. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of preparation. I sold everything I owned in Texas, my truck, my tools, even my late father's gun collection. Everything had to go. I wasn't coming back. I shipped 3 boxes of clothes and memories to Cebu and bought a one-way ticket. Celeste met me at the airport again, this time with her whole family. Luz hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, tears in her eyes as she called me son in English. Anna and Joy practiced their English on me during the drive to their neighborhood, asking about Texas and cowboys and oil rigs. It wasn't the nicest part of Cebu, but the warmth was overwhelming. Their house was small but clean, decorated with pictures of Jesus and family photos. They'd prepared a feast, lechon, rice, fresh fruit, everything they could afford. "For our new kuya," Anna said shyly, using the Visayan word for older brother. Miguel, Celeste's uncle, pulled me aside during dinner. "You're a good man, Earl," he said in careful English. "I can see it in your eyes. Take care of our girl. She's been through a lot." I promised I would. 2 weeks later, we had our wedding ceremony at the local Catholic church. I wore a barong Tagalog that made me sweat buckets in the tropical heat, but Celeste looked like an angel in white. The priest spoke mostly in Visayan, but I understood the important parts. When he said we could kiss, Celeste whispered, "I love you, my husband," against my lips. After the ceremony, over beers and more, lechon, the whole neighborhood seemed to celebrate with us. Old women pinched my cheeks and called me handsome. Kids stared at the giant American who married their 8 Celeste. I felt like I belonged somewhere for the first time in decades. That night, lying in bed in our new apartment, our first home, together, Celeste curled up against my chest and whispered, "Now we can start our real life together, my love." The honeymoon phase lasted exactly 6 weeks. At first, I attributed the small irritations to cultural adjustment. Celeste spent hours on Facebook messaging people I didn't know. When I asked about it, she'd say, "Just friends from work," or "family stuff, nothing important." Money seemed to disappear faster than I'd calculated. Her family's emergencies came up weekly. "Earl, Anna needs money for school supplies," Celeste would say, showing me messages on her phone. "It's only 3,000 pesos. 3,000. Pesos was about $60, but 60 here, 100 there. It added up quickly. "Joy has a toothache," came next. "She needs to see the dentist." Then it was Luz needing money for house repairs, Miguel's motorbike breaking down. Cousins I'd never met having medical bills. I didn't mind helping, this was what family did. But when I suggested maybe we should budget for these expenses, Celeste got quiet. "You don't understand Filipino culture," she said, her voice cooler than I'd ever heard it. "Family is everything here. When family needs help, you help. No questions." I tried to explain that I wasn't against helping, just that we needed to plan better. She'd nod and agree, but then her phone would ring with another crisis. The breaking point came when she asked for $1,500 for her cousin's medical bills. I'd never heard of this cousin before. "Which cousin?" I asked. "Rosalind," she said quickly. "Luz's sister's daughter. She has diabetes." When I asked if we could visit Rosalind in the hospital, Celeste got defensive. "You don't trust me," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You think I'm lying about my family." We had our first real fight that night, voices raised, accusations flying. "I never said you were lying," I protested. "I just want to understand where our money is going." "Our money," she snapped. "It's your money, right? Because you keep track of every peso like I'm going to steal from you." She slept on the couch and didn't speak to me for 3 days. To smooth things over, I suggested we focus on the restaurant plan. It was supposed to be our shared dream, our future together. Celeste lit up immediately, all smiles and excitement again, like our fight had never happened. "Oh, Earl, yes, let's start looking at locations." We spent the next few weeks visiting potential spots around the city. She had so many ideas: serve American breakfast for homesick expats, Filipino comfort food for locals, maybe some fusion dishes that could bridge both worlds. "Imagine," she said, squeezing my hand as we stood in an empty space near the IT district. "Our own place, our own business, building something together." I loved seeing her passionate about something that was ours, not another family emergency. We found what seemed like the perfect spot, 250 square meters in a busy area, where office workers grabbed lunch. The rent was 8,000 pesos a month, about $160. The owner wanted 6 months up front plus a security deposit, 28,000 pesos total, roughly $550. "This is it, my love," Celeste said, her eyes shining. "Our future starts here. I can already see the tables, the kitchen, the customers enjoying our food." I was ready to withdraw the money from my Bitcoin wallet when she stopped me. "Wait," she said, her expression suddenly serious. "Before we do this, we need to talk about something important. Something I should have mentioned before." That evening she sat me down with tea and spoke more carefully than usual. "Earl, in Filipino culture, when a woman marries, her husband provides a dowry to show he can take care of her and her family. It's tradition, very important. I'd heard of dowries but thought they typically went from the bride's family to the groom's." "I don't understand," I said. "What kind of dowry?" She took my hands in hers. "Since we're married now, your assets should become family assets. Your Bitcoin, it should be in both our names. It shows respect for our marriage and my family. It's the honorable thing to do." I stared at her, processing what she was asking. "Celeste, that's my entire retirement savings, everything I have." I stared at her for a long moment, processing what she was asking. 2.3 Bitcoin, worth about $60,000 at the time. She wanted joint access to my entire nest egg. "Celeste," I said slowly, "that's my retirement money, everything I have." She looked hurt, her lower lip trembling slightly. "We're married, Earl. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. That's how marriage works, isn't it?" But what was hers exactly? She had no assets, no savings, no income, beyond what I provided. I tried to explain that cryptocurrency wasn't like a joint bank account. "Whoever has the private keys controls everything," I said. "There's no joint custody of Bitcoin. Either you trust me to manage it, or I have to trust you completely." "So you don't trust me," she said, tears starting to form. "Your own wife." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Here was this beautiful woman who'd married an old American fool, who'd welcomed me into her family, who'd given up her independence to build a life with me. And I was acting like she was trying to rob me. "It's not about trust," I said weakly. "It's about being careful." "Careful with your wife?" she asked. "Earl, in the Philippines, a man provides for his woman. He shows she can depend on him." "How can I depend on you if you keep secrets?" Maybe she was right about Filipino culture. Maybe I was being selfish, applying American thinking to a Filipino marriage. Over the next week, she brought it up almost daily, always gently, never pressuring. "I was talking to my mother about the restaurant," she'd say. "She asked if you'd provided properly for me yet." I didn't know what to tell her. Her Uncle Miguel made comments about American men who kept secrets from their wives. "A real man shares everything with his woman," he said over beers one evening. "No secrets, no separate money. That's how you build trust." The pressure was constant but subtle, and I began to feel like maybe I was being unreasonable. Finally, I proposed a compromise. I'd create a new wallet with half my Bitcoin, 1.15 coins, about $30,000, and give her the keys. The other half would stay in my personal wallet for emergencies. "That way we both have security," I explained. She seemed genuinely happy with this arrangement, kissing me when I agreed. "Thank you, my love. Now I feel like your real wife." We spent an afternoon setting up her Electrum wallet on her laptop. I transferred the coins while she watched, explaining how the private keys worked, how to check the balance, how to make transactions. When the transaction confirmed on the blockchain, she kissed me deeply. "Now we're really partners," she said. Things got weird after that, in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. Celeste became secretive about her phone, stepping outside to take calls or switching to Visi, and when I walked into the room, when I asked who she was talking to, she'd say family or friends, nothing important, but her tone was always slightly defensive. The restaurant plan mysteriously stalled. Every location we'd previously loved suddenly had problems. Too expensive, bad location, wrong size. "Maybe we should wait," she'd say when I brought up moving forward. "Make sure we have enough capital." Meanwhile, her spending seemed to increase. New clothes appeared in her closet, expensive makeup on her vanity, jewelry I'd never seen before. When I asked about it, she had explanations. "Anna bought this for me," she'd say about a designer purse. "Early birthday gift." Anna was 19 and worked part-time at a call center, making 8,000 pesos a month. The math didn't add up, but when I mentioned it, Celeste got offended. "Are you accusing my sister of lying?" One morning, I woke up to find Celeste gone, and a note saying she was visiting her aunt in Bohol for a few days. "Family emergency," the note said. "I'll call you tonight." She'd never mentioned an aunt in Bohol before. When I tried calling, her phone went straight to voicemail. 3 days turned into a week. I was starting to panic when she finally returned. But she was different, distant, distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. "I needed time to think," she said when I asked where she'd been. "Marriage is a big adjustment. Sometimes a woman needs space." I wanted to believe her, but something felt fundamentally off. That night, I checked my Bitcoin wallet balance out, of habit. My remaining 1.15 coins were still there, untouched. But when I tried to access the wallet I'd created for Celeste, just to verify everything was secure, I got an error message. "Wallet file corrupted or moved," the app said. My stomach dropped. The next morning, while Celeste was at the market buying groceries, I went through her laptop. I felt terrible doing it, invading her privacy, acting like a suspicious husband. But I needed to understand what was happening. Her browser history told a story that made my blood run cold. Multiple visits to cryptocurrency exchange sites, Binance, Coinbase, local Filipino exchanges I'd never heard of, wallet apps downloaded and deleted, and something that made my hands shake: Bitcoin mixing services. These were tools used to obscure the trail of cryptocurrency transactions, typically used by people who wanted to hide where their coins came from or where they were going. I found her Electrum wallet file buried in a folder labeled School Documents. It was password protected, but I knew Celeste's passwords. She used the same one for everything, her birthday plus the word love. The wallet opened, and my heart sank into my stomach. It was empty, completely empty. The 115 Bitcoin I'd transferred to her 6 weeks ago, worth over $25,000, was gone. The transaction history showed 3 transfers over the past month, one large chunk to an address I didn't recognize, and 2 smaller amounts to different addresses. All of them had been sent to mixing services that would make them untraceable. I sat there staring at the empty wallet, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach and knocked all the air out of my lungs. $25,000. Gone. When Celeste came home with groceries, rice, vegetables, the normal household supplies, I was still sitting at her laptop. "Earl, what are you doing?" she asked, setting down plastic bags. There was no suspicion in her voice, just casual curiosity. I turned the screen toward her, showing the empty wallet. "Where's the Bitcoin, Celeste?" She looked at the screen for a moment, then at me. Her expression didn't change. No surprise, no guilt, no confusion. Just calm assessment. "What Bitcoin?" she said evenly. "Don't lie to me," I said, standing up from the chair so fast it almost tipped over. "I can see the transactions right here. You moved everything out of this wallet 6 weeks ago." Celeste set down her purse and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, completely different from the warm woman I'd married. "Earl, you're confusing yourself. That wallet was always empty." She was gaslighting me, but I had proof right there on the screen. I showed her the transaction history, pointing to the dates, the amounts, the receiving addresses. "Look, right here. 3 transactions, all to mixing services. You stole my Bitcoin. She glanced at the screen with the casual interest of someone looking at a grocery list, then shrugged. I don't understand all that computer stuff, my love. Maybe you made a mistake when you set it up. The casual way she lied was worse than the theft itself. This woman I'd married, who'd called me my love every day for 8 months, who'd cried when I proposed, who'd welcomed me into her family, she was looking me in the eye and denying reality. Celeste, please, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Just tell me what happened to the money. If you needed it for something urgent, we could have talked about it. We're married. We're supposed to be partners. She sat down on our couch and pulled out her phone, scrolling through Facebook like we weren't having a conversation about $25,000. Earl, you're being paranoid. Maybe you should see a doctor. Sometimes older men get confused about these things. That's when it hit me like a freight train. She'd planned this from the beginning. The dowry story, the joint wallet, even her mysterious trip to Bohol. She'd probably been planning how to steal my Bitcoin since our first video call. Every conversation about Filipino culture, every guilt trip about trust, every tear she'd shed, it had all been calculated. This was all a setup, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up from her phone with fake concern. What was a setup, my love? You're scaring me. The marriage, everything. You never loved me. You just wanted my money. For the first time since I'd confronted her, her mask slipped. Just for a second I saw something else in her eyes, amusement, maybe even contempt. She smiled, just briefly, but I caught it. Earl, you're a nice man, but you're not very smart. Did you really think a woman like me would marry a man like you for love? Those words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backward, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years weighing on my shoulders. She was right. I had been stupid, foolish, desperate enough to believe that a beautiful 28-year-old woman had fallen in love with an aging oil worker from Texas who lived in a trailer park. The next few days were a blur of desperate phone calls and frantic internet research. I contacted the local police first, but the officer barely looked up from his paperwork. This is civil matter between husband and wife, he said in broken English. You give money to wife voluntarily, not theft. I reached out to the FBI's Internet Crime Division, spending hours on hold before speaking to an agent who explained that Bitcoin theft between married couples in foreign countries wasn't exactly their priority. You voluntarily transferred the cryptocurrency to your spouse, she said. That makes it very difficult to prosecute as theft. I hired a local lawyer who took 5,000 pesos up front and explained what I already suspected. Proving cryptocurrency theft without cooperation from the exchanges was nearly impossible, especially when the accused was my legal spouse, and I'd voluntarily given her access to the wallet. Philippines have no specific law for cryptocurrency theft, he said. Very hard to prosecute. Maybe you try civil court, but take many years, cost very much money. Meanwhile, Celeste acted like nothing had happened. She cooked my meals, slept in our bed, chatted with neighbors about the weather, like everything was perfectly normal. When I confronted her again, she stuck to her story with unwavering consistency. I don't know anything about any Bitcoin, Earl. You must have made a mistake. Maybe you got confused. The casual cruelty of it broke something fundamental inside me. I stopped eating regularly, stopped sleeping well. My hair seemed to turn grayer overnight. I'd catch myself staring at nothing for hours, trying to process how completely I'd been fooled. The worst part was the isolation. I was 8,000 miles from home, married to a woman who'd robbed me blind, with no real recourse and no one to turn to. My pride kept me from calling old friends back in Texas. How do you explain that you'd been completely played by someone you'd married? How do you admit to being that naive, that desperate, that stupid? After 2 months of living in this bizarre nightmare, I started planning my escape. I still had 1.15 Bitcoin in my personal wallet, about $26,000 at current. Prices, enough to get home and start over if I was very careful. The problem was getting out without Celeste knowing. If she suspected I was leaving, I was terrified she'd find a way to access my remaining Bitcoin too. Maybe she'd claim spousal rights or forge documents, or convince some corrupt official that she deserved half of everything. I couldn't take that risk. I pretended to accept the situation, stopped asking about the missing money, even started being affectionate again. It killed me inside, but I needed her to think she'd won completely. "You're right," I told her one morning over coffee. "I must have made a mistake with that wallet. I'm sorry for accusing you." She smiled and kissed my cheek. "I forgive you, my love. Marriage is about forgiveness." Meanwhile, I quietly researched flights back to Austin and started moving small amounts of money into a new bank account she didn't know about. I used internet cafes across the city, created new email addresses, covered my digital tracks as carefully as I could. The hardest part was acting normal around her family. Lou still called me son and hugged me when I visited. Anna and Joy still practiced English with me, telling me about school and their dreams for the future. Miguel still treated me like a brother, sharing beers and stories about the old days. They had no idea what their daughter and sister had done to me, and I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Maybe they were part of the scam, maybe they weren't. I'd probably never know. 3 weeks into my escape plan, Celeste dropped another bombshell that nearly destroyed my resolve. "Earl," she said over dinner, practically glowing with excitement, "I have wonderful news. We're having a baby." I stared at her, my fork halfway to my mouth. "A baby?" "Yes. I took 3 tests to be sure. We're pregnant, my love. Our little family is growing." I looked at this woman who'd destroyed my trust and stolen my life savings, now claiming to be carrying my child. Was she really pregnant? Was this another manipulation? If she was pregnant, was it even mine? We'd been intimate regularly, but given everything else that had turned out to be a lie, I couldn't be sure of anything anymore. "Are you happy, Earl?" she asked, reaching across the table to take my hand. I looked into those dark eyes that had once made me feel young again. "I'm surprised," I managed to say. "We should see a doctor. Make sure everything's okay." The pregnancy test was positive. So was the ultrasound the following week at Cebu Doctor's Hospital. Celeste was definitely pregnant, about 6 weeks along based on the measurements. Whether the baby was mine was another question entirely, but looking at those grainy black and white images on the monitor, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Maybe this changed everything. Maybe this was a sign that we could work things out. Maybe becoming parents would transform both of us, give us something real to build together. That hope lasted exactly 4 days. I came home early from a walk around the neighborhood to find Celeste on the phone, speaking rapidly in Visayan. When she saw me, she switched to English quickly. "Yes, okay, I'll call you later," she said, hanging up immediately. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Anna," she said, but her tone was off. "Sister stuff." That night, I heard her making another call from the bathroom. I pressed my ear to the door and caught fragments of conversation. She was speaking English this time, talking to a man. "The old fool bought it completely," she said quietly. "Yeah. He thinks it's his baby. No, he won't leave now. He's too invested." My blood went cold. I stepped away from the door and sat on the edge of our bed, processing what I'd just heard. The pregnancy was real, but the baby wasn't mine. She was using this new lie to keep me trapped, to prevent me from leaving or pursuing the stolen Bitcoin. Of course, the timing made sense now. She'd gotten pregnant right around the time she'd emptied the wallet, probably as insurance against exactly what I was planning. The next morning, Celeste was extra loving, rubbing her barely visible belly and talking about baby names. "If it's a boy, maybe Earl Jr., she suggested sweetly. "If it's a girl, I was thinking Celeste Marie. What do you think, Daddy?" I wanted to vomit. Instead, I smiled and played along. "Those are beautiful names," I said. That evening, I activated my escape plan. I converted my remaining Bitcoin to cash through a local exchange, withdrew everything from our joint bank account, and booked a flight to Austin, leaving the next morning. I packed one small bag with essentials and left a note on the kitchen table. "I know about the baby's real. Father, I know you never loved me. I know about the Bitcoin. Don't try to contact me. Goodbye, Celeste." I was at McTan Airport by 6 a.m., 3 hours before my flight, paranoid that Celeste would discover my note and somehow try to stop me. Maybe call the police and claim I was stealing marital assets. Maybe show up with tears and pregnancy hormones. And somehow convince me to stay. Every minute felt like an hour. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts that I didn't answer. Finally, I powered it off and threw it in a trash can near the gate. Whatever she had to say, whatever lies, or manipulations or fake emergencies she wanted to try, I didn't want to hear any of it. The flight back to Austin was the longest 18 hours of my life. I kept replaying the last 10 months, looking for signs I'd missed, moments when I could have seen through her act. They were all there once I knew what to look for. The immediate. Talk about family money problems, the pressure for joint finances, the convenient cultural explanations for everything that benefited her, the way she disappeared to Bohol right after getting access to the Bitcoin, the mixing services, the fake pregnancy scare to keep me trapped. I'd been so lonely, so desperate to feel needed and wanted, that I'd ignored every red flag. When I landed at Austin Bergstrom, I felt like a completely different person than the one who'd left. Older, definitely. Poorer, absolutely. Maybe wiser, though that remained to be seen. I took a cab to a cheap motel near the airport and sat on the bed staring at the blank wall. I was back where I'd started a year ago, except now I was down. $40,000, and had a heart that felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. The next few weeks were rough. I found a studio apartment I could afford on what was left of my money, bought basic furniture from thrift stores, and tried to figure out how to rebuild some kind of life. Friends who knew I'd gotten married asked how my wife was doing when she was coming to visit if we were planning to have kids. I told them we were getting divorced and left it at that. The shame was too deep to share the whole story. How do you explain that you'd been that naive, that desperate, that stupid? 6 months later, I'm still in that studio apartment, still single, still angry at myself for being such a complete fool. But I've learned some things I needed to know, lessons that cost me $40,000 but might have saved my life. Love isn't supposed to come with immediate financial demands. Marriage isn't supposed to be about joint access to cryptocurrency wallets and dowry payments. And when someone shows you who they really are, through their actions, not their words, you should believe them the first time. I never heard from Celeste again after that morning at the airport. Sometimes I wonder if she had the baby, if she's moved on to scamming some other lonely American retiree who thinks he can buy love with Bitcoin. Part of me actually hopes she's happy, which probably makes me an even bigger fool than I already was. The Bitcoin I lost is gone forever. I've accepted that. Those coins are probably scattered across a dozen different wallets by now, laundered through mixing services and exchanges until they're completely untraceable. But I got something valuable in return. The knowledge that I'd rather be alone and authentic than coupled and deceived. I'd rather face loneliness honestly than live in a fantasy built on lies. I'm 65 years old, living on Social Security in a studio apartment in Austin, Texas. It's not the retirement I planned, not the golden years I dreamed about during all those years on the oil rigs. But it's honest, it's real, it's mine. Some nights I still think about those 2 weeks when I was genuinely happy, when I believed someone loved me enough to build a life together. Those feelings were real, even if everything else was fake. That has to count for something. They say there's no fool like an old fool, and they're probably right, but I'm done being foolish now. I've learned to protect my seed phrase, my heart, and what's left of my dignity. If loneliness is the price of keeping what remains of my self-respect and my savings, I'll pay it gladly. Because sometimes the most expensive lesson is the one that finally teaches you what you're really worth.